Beacon pines, pines harder. Revenge served cold. Second time's a charm? Wait, that's it? This ends with a crummy cliffhanger just when it was getting good? I was even starting to like Iggy. No way. I refuse to be associated with some never-ending parade of sequels. Let's go back and find something more definitive. Luca began to respond, but the sky answered for him as the clouds above began to break, revealing patches of star-filled summer night. Moonlight filtered down, shimmering in the treetops. Luca stopped himself mid-sentence. After the foul harvest destroyed their wealth and reputation, the Valentines shuttered off their estate from the rest of town. Luca saw Beck skulking by the gate. Grabbed the wrought iron bars and shook the gate. Voice was an excited whisper. mysterious figure retracted their mask, hair pushing out from all corners. A chill ran down Luca's spine. His vision blurred. Beck stifled a sharp wince, and Luca looked down to see himself wrenching her hand. Gran tousled her hair back under the face mask. Gran gave Eris a curt nod and disappeared. Chapter 5. What big ears you have. Lucas sat shivering in the bushes, staring at his feet. After checking to make sure the coast was clear, Beck gave him a gentle tug on his sweater. The clipboard finished writing with a scratchy flourish and looked up. Mr. Nuncreed, arms crossed over his paunch, gave an exhausted sigh. He snatched the pad and scribbled his name so hard the pen nearly snapped. The clipboards looked at each other for a moment, almost pondering the possibility, then broke into laughter as they walked away. William Kerr and Gus Valentine proudly surveyed the half-covered festival banner. The mayor gave a half-hearted shrug. Kerr locked his arm on Gus's shoulder. With a glimmer in his eye, Kerr gestured grandly toward the horizon. Rollo waggled his head with pride. Luca sucked in a long breath. Rollo let out a low whistle. Rollo and Luca shot back a look. Luca gazed out the window. Chapter 6. Secret Lair. Summer forged ahead, but the nights only seemed to grow colder. Luca walked home slowly under the pale starlight, cautious to avoid any more surprises lurking in the shadows. Reaching home, he slipped quietly into bed, half dreading what they might discover the next day. Luca and Beck rolled their eyes as Rollo strutted across the room. Rollo flung open the cabinet with confidence. He coughed as a veil of dust hit his face. of realization crept onto Luca's face. All three kids snapped to glance at each other, then sprinted in turn toward the kitchen. Before he could finish, Luca scrambled up Rollo's back. The three crowded around the hutch to peer in. With the glass doors opened, a perfect porcelain display gleamed in front of them. Their eyes searched for anything amiss, but the only distinct feature was its impeccability. As Beck pulled on one of the teacups, it slanted forward with a hollow click. The entire hutch began to rustle and slide under its own power. Rollo casually spun open a lid and dipped his finger in the jam. He smacked his lips. Rollo plunged his hand in the jar, fishing out a soggy slip of paper. Rollo offered the slimy note to Luca and licked his fingers clean. Luca jostled each cabinet drawer in turn. Only one was unlocked. He fingered through the filing cabinet, pausing at a bulging folder labeled. Well, for a long moment, he just stared at it. Luca nodded and caressed the label with his thumb. Rollo swiped the folder from the drawer and began leafing through the pages. He whistled to himself, barely looking at the text. He stopped at a page and mimed, holding up a monocle. Rollo looked up with heightened surprise. Rollo's finger traced across the page. scanned through several more pages. Luca, staring blankly at the cabinet this whole time, spoke softly. Rollo rustled the folder, trying to loose more pages. Luca frantically shoved the remaining cabinet folders, trying to find another labeled Walter. Luca slammed the drawer shut. A spider web of string connected photos of people from the town, interspersed with hastily scrawled notes. They crowded around a worn-down old map of Beacon Pines. Rollo carefully traced the path with his finger. He jabbed down at the end point. Luca looked up from the map. Beck flicked off the light, and they became statues in the dark. Overhead, creaking floorboards bent under slow, deliberate steps. The kids looked up, the tilt of their necks following each footfall. Then suddenly, it stopped. Without realizing, they'd been holding their breath. All three exhaled shakily. A muffled male voice broke the silence. A final few footsteps reached the entrance above them, and the voice now echoed down the stairs. The three kids shuffled to the corners without a peep. As he began to descend the stairs, the man's voice punctuated every new step. Thump. Step, the man paused, squinting to search the room for signs of life. Rollo shifted suddenly. Luca gave him an intense, chastising look and whispered through clenched teeth. It was too late. Rollo was already inching toward the stairway. He screeched as he charged toward the shadowy figure. With all his weight, Rollo tackled the man to the ground. From the dark corner, they saw something move. Luca scrambled to the hunched figure on the ground. Pressing his fingers to the man's neck, he sighed with relief. As Beck flicked back on the light, Luca and Rollo both gasped in stereo. Chapter 7. The interrogation of Hiram Tolliver. Still unconscious, Mr. Tolliver slumped heavily in a shoddy old chair. His hands were bound with rope, his feet tied with some loose string. The kids huddled in a circle, discussing their plan. One thing was certain, they couldn't just let Mr. Tolliver go. They needed to know what he was doing in Luca's house. After some deliberation, it was decided. They'd run the classic good cop, chill cop interrogation. Luca walked calmly to the light switch, flicking it off and on a few times. Mr. Tolliver shook his head, gathering his wits. He looked over to find Luca, who returned a calming grin. Rollo and Beck emerged from hiding to give a timid wave. Luca glanced over to Rollo and Beck, who replied with skeptical looks. Mr. Tolliver exhaled with disappointment. Luca gestured to the corner. Luca looked again to Rollo and Beck. This time they shrugged. Luca began to slowly loosen the bindings. Mr. Tolliver gently rubbed his wrists. He edged imperceptibly toward the stairs as he spoke. Before the kids had even noticed his movement, Mr. Tolliver was at the light switch. He punctuated his final words by flicking the switch and rushing up the stairs. Beck darted to the wall and turned back on the lights. It was too late. Rollo confirmed what they all heard. Mr. Tolliver's muffled voice came from behind the door. They looked bewildered at each other. They heard the staccato thump of quick steps exiting the house. The kids looked down in resignation. This isn't how it goes in Hank Atomic. For some reason, they'd always assumed it was up to them to save their town. Luca opened his mouth, hoping to conjure some magical words to make this right. Only a hollow croak escaped. The end. Well, we certainly aren't going to find a grand resolution to our tale locked in a basement. Back to the drawing board. They'd run the classic good cop, hard cop interrogation. Rollo brandished a steely gaze. I've got this. Read about it 100 times. Rollo swaggered past the chair which propped up the slumping Hiram Tolliver. Without even looking at his captive, he began with a long, blustery drawl. Mr. Tolliver remained motionless. Rollo spun around to face him. He'd clearly expected to rouse Mr. Tolliver with his booming voice. Beck and Luca gave each other an unsure glance. Rollo slammed his fist on the table. He grabbed the table lamp and beamed it onto the unconscious face. Mr. Tolliver groaned and slowly lifted it. He recoiled with a muddled, weary squint. The chair wobbled as he attempted to straighten up. Mr. Tolliver could only make out rough shapes through the glaring light. With a gruff tone, Rollo hoped to both conceal his voice and intimidate. The doubtful expression on Beck and Luca's faces transformed into awe. Rollo, hitting his stride, was now channeling every detective trope his memory could recall. He slammed the table again. Mr. Tolliver's voice became desperate. He was nearly in tears. Mr. Tolliver was in a daze, now more confused than ever. He shook his head, feeling more and more dizzy. His voice faded to a whisper. With that, Mr. Tolliver passed out cold. Rollo swung around with a repentant grimace. Chapter 8. 6 feet under, 3 towns over. The kids spent the rest of the afternoon combing through dusty piles of old county records, desperately searching for anything that could help them make sense of Mr. Tolliver's cryptic utterance. Luca tried to shake the thought of Gran's basement, but his focus wavered. Explosives, messages hidden in jam, dossiers on various town figures, and a corkboard threaded with photos. Gran was the only family he had left. He still couldn't bring himself to believe the worst. But the old map with the symbol of explosives in town square made that difficult. As the sun began to set, the kids were no closer to the truth. Rollo shut his book with an assertive nod. Rollo muttered under his breath. Beck slammed her finger down on the open page before glancing down to read. Something tickled the back of Luca's mind. The question hung in the air. Beck rubbed her eye. Luca's heart was pounding as he approached the house. If he was lucky, Gran, or whoever it was, hadn't gotten back yet. And of course, there was Mr. Tolliver tied up and unconscious in the basement. Dealing with him would be the first order of business. Luca shook out his arms to calm his nerves before entering. He held perfectly still, tempering his breath, and listened closely. She was asleep. His only hope was that she hadn't found Mr. Tolliver before dozing off. Mr. Tolliver was nowhere to be seen. Or maybe Gran knew everything. Luca's hungry stomach groaned. Not realizing it, he'd gone the entire day without eating. Luca rushed over to the pile of jam jars, unscrewed one, and shoveled a handful into his mouth. He flipped the lid to read the label. As Luca climbed the final stair, the emotion of the day dragged heavily on him. With each consecutive step, his legs weakened. His stride began to falter. He tried to grab for the railing to steady himself. Something was wrong. Luca groaned and tried to move. His limbs might as well have been bolted to the ground. Through numb lips, he mumbled just before falling asleep. Chapter 9. A speech to end all speeches. Luca awoke to find himself face down in bed. He moaned into his pillow. Why would Gran drug him? Or rather, why was she trying to drug Mr. Nuncreed? Shaking the questions from his woozy head, Luca snapped back to the matter at hand. Augustus Valentine nervously wiped his brow. Gus cleared his throat and awkwardly loosened his tie. William Kerr bounded on the stage with the energy of a preacher at a big tent revival. He gave Gus a hearty slap on the back and motioned him off the stage. Mr. Kerr pulled a thick stack of note cards out from his vest. Mr. Kerr took a moment to survey the crowd. He wiped away a He thumped the podium to emphasize each word. Mr. Kerr nodded confidently, biting his lip. The crowd was silent, in rapt attention. Mr. Kerr methodically made eye contact with each section of the crowd. His voice began to build to a crescendo. The crowd began to look around nervously. Mr. Kerr quickly flicked through his note cards. He raised his hands up to the heavens. At that moment, a merciless wall of impossibly cold air ripped through the crowd, instantly freezing everyone and everything it touched. For a man like William Kerr, this was a fitting way for things to end. On a stage, with an entire town frozen in rapt attention for the rest of time. The end.
There's that ice again! Whenever I think we're getting close, it comes along and ruins everything! Maybe we should just quit? Maybe you should just close the book, walk away, and never think of me again.
No, I don't mean that. We got a little closer this time. We just need to try again. Please. They'd run the classic good cop, sly cop interrogation. Luca and Rollo ducked behind a barrel, leaving Beck to her task. With a few crisp snaps, she roused Mr. Tolliver. Mr. Tolliver looked down and shifted a bit, testing his restraints. Beck caught herself before letting the surprise manifest on her face. She'd already gotten him to reveal his relation to Gran. This was going to be easy. Mr. Tolliver wriggled a bit in his restraints. Beck quickly removed the ropes. Mr. Tolliver rubbed the growing knot on his forehead. Beck twirled her hand, as if to prompt Mr. Tolliver to finish her thought. Beck shook her head and clicked her tongue. Mr. Tolliver let out an amused huff in agreement. Beck was on a roll now, playing Mr. Tolliver like a fiddle. Heading for the stairs, Mr. Tolliver hesitated and turned to Beck with a puzzled look. She grinned and gave him a peppy wave. With a shrug, he continued up the stairs, whistling a jaunty tune. Beck blinked slowly in disappointment. She turned to the table and began tearing small scraps of paper. Beck marked each scrap of paper and leaned back. Luca and Beck looked at Rollo with amazement. looked around nervously. Eris's cry hung in the air. Solomon stood proudly at the entrance holding a brown bag overflowing with blood. Solomon shoveled a surprising amount of licorice into his mouth. Beck cupped her hands on the glass to peek inside. Beck flung open the door, and they all squeezed in. Luca cracked his knuckles and entered the letters into the keypad. The inside of the phone booth dropped loose from its shell. Without even the space to panic, they closed their eyes, held their breath, and suddenly, the chaotic descent slowed to an effortless landing. It was unclear where they ended up, but at least it was solid ground. The air was stagnant and smelled vaguely of chlorine. Rollo's hands hovered over the field of blinking buttons. Joseph waited for a moment in silence. He gestured toward the strange tubes. Nuncreed let out a growl of a sigh. He shook his head wistfully. Nuncreed took a menacing step towards the children. Luca began to laugh. The color drained from Nuncreed's face. Nuncreed grabbed Luca by the shoulders. His eyes were frantic. A jolt of realization struck Mr. Nuncreed. Chapter 8. The cold, hard truth. Beck leapt up, allowing the suction to yank her into dimness eclipsed around her like the shutter of a camera, as she seemed to cover great distance in mere moments. Her only points of reference were glints of upcoming turns, which approached with frightening speed, only to carom her gracefully along. She heard the tinny, distant echoes of Rollo's glee. Once she stopped fighting against it, the ride was impossibly smooth. Then, all of a sudden, as if minutes had passed in an instant, light blazed into view. A burst of wintry air snuffed across her face, and she was flung out into the cold. As they rounded the corner to the frozen town square, they spotted Mr. Nuncreed inching cautiously toward a pit at its center. He held his arms out gingerly, as if approaching a beast in the wild. Upon closing the distance, Luca recognized what Nuncreed was after. Gran stood confidently at the edge, one arm outstretched over the abyss. Nearby, a wheelbarrow had been emptied out. She held a lit torch, which flickered in the bitter wind. Mr. Nuncreed turned back toward the kids, desperation in his eyes. Rollo and Beck held steadfast in awe. Luca approached closer.
Mr. Nuncreed spun back toward Gran, his voice growing louder. Mr. Nuncreed winced with anguish. His voice hardened. They both now yelled, not to each other, but at fate itself, making their peace with long-held burdens. The wind howled with encouragement. They menaced at each other, both catching their breath. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Amid a blur of emotions and memories, Luca's mind flooded with questions. The wind calmed, as if to give him the stage. And in the stillness, he began to weep. It was all just too much. Falling to his knees, Luca whimpered softly. The tears crystallized as they hit the snow. Gran stared at Luca for a moment with warm sympathy, remembering why this was all necessary. She stiffened up and brandished the torch at Mr. Nuncreed. Ignoring his final plea, Gran flung the torch into the deep darkness. She smiled and exhaled in relief. Mr. Nuncreed moaned in resignation. The torch echoed as it ricocheted down the hole, punctuated with a thunderous thud. Before Gran could finish, the ground shook her to silence. Gran only had time to spin around and run to Luca. Her attempt to shield him, an honorable but trifling act. Unflinching love, pitted against an unthinking horror. There was no contest. Her warm embrace froze in an instant. That is where they remain, fixed in place, forever. And so, our story ends on this melancholy scene. In a town brought low by its secrets, sits the frozen statues of a misguided band. The end. Well, that was dire. On the bright side, we finally figured out where all the ice is coming from. Now, we just need to find a way to deal with a mystic, unfathomable force of nature. And in the stillness, he began to hum. After the death of his father, Luca had trouble sleeping. Each night, his mother would sit at the foot of his bed and hum a gentle melody. It was the only thing that could calm his mind. The only thing that, however briefly, could make it all seem okay. That melody pervaded every memory Luca had of his mother, shivering in the raw snow,
He began to hum it out loud. Gran lowered the torch, listening closely. As recognition slowly set in, her heart sank. Those countless nights of consolation, the incomparable loss they shared together. She let the torch fall to the snow and sizzle out. A few steps toward Luca was all she could bear before dropping to the snow herself. Through a flood of tears, she began to hum along, note for note. Lifted his head in astonishment. The last time he heard that melody was the last night he saw his mother. Luca blinked through blurry, watery eyes, trying to see more clearly. He could just make out the impression of a familiar face. He peered across the snowscape at the woman on her knees. Something about her was undeniably his mother. Only smaller, older, changed. Luca sprinted as fast as he could toward his mother. They held each other close, and the cold retreated from their bodies. Eleanor looked down at Luca, tightening her embrace in an appeal for forgiveness. Joseph slumped into the cold, wet snow. For the first time in a long time, her voice felt like her own again. Luca gazed down at Nuncreed with pity. He looked small, Joseph stared into the snow, as if searching it for answers. Chapter 9. The Devil You Know. 7 months ago. Eleanor Van Horn crept down the maze of sterile hallways under perennial harvest. She stopped in front of the large steel door marked Deep Engineering. No turning back now. She raised a trembling hand. The stolen keycard worked as promised, and the door bust open with mechanical efficiency. She was immediately hit with the smell of disinfectant. It was some sort of laboratory. In one corner was a desk covered in papers. Across the room stood a tall metal pod with hoses protruding from its base. She rushed to the desk and began shifting through the piles of papers. They were experiment reports on something called Tempus liquamen. There were dozens of them. Every one stamped failed. Eleanor heard the sharp echo of footsteps approaching. She was out of time. Her eyes scanned the room, eventually landing on the strange pod. Muttering a curse under her breath, she dashed over and dove inside. Mr. Kerr addressed the crowd with a sarcastic tone. Whispers filtered through the crowd. Torment dragged on Joseph Nuncrete's face. He paused for a moment, plucking a piece of fuzz from his sweater and discarding it to the ground. gave a bow of deference. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Solomon pulled a glass vial from his pocket. In one smooth motion, he downed its contents. A triumphant smile grew across Solomon's lips. His body and face began to contort and expand as he disappeared into a belching green mist. A hushed horror gripped the crowd. This is a story about change. Sharper examined his new hands. Sharper choked out a crude squawk of a laugh. Frustrated grumbles sprinkled through the crowd. William Kerr gave a subtle nod to the clipboards. A helpless quiet settled over the crowd. Sharper addressed the crowd with indignant pride. He'd planned this moment for so long that now, at the deed's fruition, it almost felt frivolous. Mr. Kerr flourished a preposterously elaborate bow. Sharper coughed up one final laugh and cracked his knuckles. And so, Sharper set about remaking the town in his own image. The fertilizer factory soon reopened for business. Sales rose steadily as more and more farmers across the countryside began to swear by its miraculous properties. Beacon Pines became famous. A secretive town that, for the right price, shared its gifts with all. Gifts that became more and more necessary in a world where winters grew longer and longer. The end. This is wrong, but things are becoming clearer now. You can feel it, right? We can't let Sharper win. He might just be the key to this whole thing. Let's see. There was a malice lurking behind those eyes. Like a trap ready to spring. Luca felt the weight of Nuncreed's hand on his shoulder. Something wasn't right. He didn't know why, but something was telling Luca to get out of there. Luca twisted free of Nuncreed's grasp. The two scurried off, eagerly formulating a plan. Luca stuck a toy stretchy hand onto the hook. Those things always get dirty anyway. Luca tied a small magnet to the line, fishing with the law of attraction. Luca wrapped a twig of thyme around the hook. Some fish have refined taste. Luca tied a bent nail onto the line. If all you have is a hammer, he aired a long holler into the woods. Luca felt his eyes getting heavy and plopped into the beanbag. He conceded to its lumpy embrace. Once again, Luca found himself in a vast black expanse. This time, he knew exactly where to go. He took a single confident step forward. The world flickered and pulsed. He found himself standing in front of the frigid air of a blazing campfire. The source. He plopped down cross-legged and gazed into the cold flame, waiting. Soon enough, the fire began to die out, popping sporadically, until all that was left was Luca stood up and dusted himself off. He plucked the glowing ember from the cold ash, examined it, and slid it into his pocket. A keepsake. The voice of his father spoke behind him. "You made me proud, Buckaroo." Luca turned to face him. "Dad, what is this place?" A warm grin grew across his father's face. "A place where everything that has been and everything that could be all wait together." Luca found himself staring at his father's face, trying as hard as he could to memorize every single detail. "Wait? For what?" Another voice spoke out as Luca's doppelganger stepped forward. "That's up to you." Without knowing why, Luca began to weep. Is any of this real? Are you real?" Luca's father bent down to smudge away a tear. "Of course. I'm as real as the part of you that misses me." Luca turned to look at the older version of himself. "And you?" The doppelganger choked back tears. "I'm as real as the part of you that's angry he's gone." Does that make sense? Through his tears, Luca laughed. "I think so." His father pulled him in for an embrace. "Time to go, Buckaroo." Luca was startled from his dream by a banging on the floor. A commanding voice rumbled from below. Just as Luca sprang to lock the entry hatch, the door knocked open. Chapter 5. Dangers big and small. Luca stumbled back. He heard the rope ladder creak under significant weight. Keeping his eyes fixed on the hatch, he inched backward to the balcony. As his hand grasped the door handle, Luca froze. A large figure clumsily wriggled up through the hole. The large figure cocked its head inquisitively. Luca's jaw dropped. He peered more closely at the man standing in front of him. Something about him was undeniably Rollo, only bigger, older, changed. Rollo proudly presented his hands to Luca. Luca moved to the side and pointed Rollo to his reflection in the balcony window. His hands shot up to his face. Rollo shadowboxed a few jabs. With a yelp, Rollo dove behind Luca. She shot a nervous glance at Rollo. Beck's eyes narrowed. Ilona tried to put on a smile. She sighed, and after a moment, looked down at Beck sympathetically. She flashed a sly grin and tousled Beck's hair. Luca gave Rollo a quick elbow to the ribs. Beck flicked a large sheet of paper out of her pocket and slammed it on the floor. Rollo started to wiggle with excitement. Chapter 6. The Heist. They spent the night's end huddled around that small map, formulating a plan to infiltrate the headquarters of Perennial Harvest. It would be no small feat, a modern facility equipped with all manner of technology, not to mention the swarm of clipboards that would most certainly be scattered throughout. By the time the sun began to peek through the car window used as a makeshift balcony door, all were in agreement. This could just work. The final day before the festival would be used to prepare. They'd need to pool every resource at their disposal, pull every favor with a thread. Even enlist some unsavory characters around town with important tasks only they were suited for. Luckily, there was enough ill will and mistrust toward Perennial Harvest that alliances could be found at a bargain. Luca, Beck, and Rollo rubbed their eyes as they exited the treehouse. They hadn't slept at all that night. There was no time. The festival was to begin in one day, and they each had their assignments.